morning, everybody, and welcome to Soccerex. Here on the Academy stage, do filter over if you're in the village. I'm looking at you guys specifically. And for the next half an hour or so, we're going to be talking about sustainability in football or soccer for the North Americans of you in the room. My name is Ben Jacobs. I am a sports broadcaster based out of the UK and sometimes out here in North America as well. We want to make this as interactive as possible, so if any of you have got any questions throughout the panel, feel free to stick up your hands. Make sure that you take lots of photos as well. I know we've got the Inter Miami media team at the front here. Just don't photograph me, but you've got Gabriella to my left and you can take a nice picture of her, but put a lot on social media, and please do engage and get involved. So without further ado, let me introduce our panel and then we will get underway. To my left here is Gabriella Mas, who is the founder of Reboot. We'll hear about that in just a moment. Next to her is Tom Gribben, who's the founder of Planet League. We've got Luis Rodriguez, who is the president of Juarez, and I'm told that that has a very firm H in the pronunciation. Excellent. How was the pronunciation?
Excellent.
Mark it out of 10.
9 out of 10.
A 9 out of 10,
9 out of 10.
Excellent. And then over on the far side, we've got Sebastian Gray, who is the founder of Everclimb. Now, you'll hear about all these companies in just a moment. But first of all, let's start with you, Gabriella. Great that you can join us on a day where there is some big news to kick off this panel with. And that is that Reboot have a continued partnership with Inter Miami. It's been announced only an hour or so ago, and it's the first that you have done in retail. Tell us more.
Yes, so Reboot started as a solution to textile waste in the professional football industry. So what it is, it's an upcycling brand. We partner with football clubs. We collect residual inventory, damaged product, player-worn gear, and we upcycle it into fan merchandise, collaborating with a global network of designers. And Inter Miami is the first club that we have partnered with, and we've now established a league-wide partnership with Major League Soccer and Fanatics, which is really exciting. So our first retail collection has been teased today on social and through the press release, and we'll officially launch 50 unique jerseys on November 20th.
Fantastic. Definitely deserves a round of applause, and we obviously will delve into this in a bit more detail, but you mentioned the social media. If people right now in this room want to see it, where can they do that?
They can go to Inter Miami CF's Instagram or reboot.football. Football, sorry, in Spanish. But you can check out all of the images there.
So we've got football, we've got Juarez, and definitely on the losing end here with my English accent and pronunciations. So more on Reboot and the continued partnership with Inter Miami in just a moment. We've got Tom Gribben from Planet League. He's going to tell you about that in just a moment. Now, I'm from Leicester, and he is a Nottingham Forest fan, so we've put some distance between us, because if some of you from the UK are aware of the East Midlands, we are fierce, fierce rivals. But before he goes into that detail, we've got a video that we can play telling you more about what they do.
Welcome to Planet League.
So Gary, what do you think?
Unbelievably high quality, one of the best leagues that I've ever seen in my lifetime.
It's Planet League.
I mean, that was a disgrace seeing Nottingham Forest go top of the table ahead of Manchester City, but other than that, it's fascinating the way that you've been able to merge almost sustainability with fan engagement, with gamification. Tell us more.
The biggest thing that football can do for the planet is to get its fans to take action. The fans lucky enough to go to a game, yes, recycle, think about how you get there in terms of transport solutions and the food you eat. But what we all know is that football gets into the households. We're all really passionate about it. Our children are, our parents are, and it carries on through the generations. And I think 4 billion people watched the last Men's World Cup, and many watched the Women's World Cup. So it's a huge part of society. And what we're using is that love you have for your club and pulling in greener living, go green for your team, score some goals by switching lights off, by recycling, by switching to green energy. And the more that Forest fans do, we pit them against Leicester fans, or if you're an Arsenal fan, we pit you against Tottenham fans, and we really trade off that rivalry and that love you have for your club. We started out 4 years ago, we've built it up to 84 clubs in the UK, including all 20 Premier League clubs, and it's going really well. So it's really exciting to see how we can use football and its ability to bring people together and make real change, not just on these important social issues in society, there's lots of them, but environmental sustainability.
Great stuff. We'll have more on Planet League in a moment, but Lewis, if I can turn to you and Juarez, as the president of the club, what are you doing from a top-down level to ensure that there is a sustainable strategy in place?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me, Ben. It's great to share the stage with Gabriela, with Tom, and with Sebastian. Great to see some familiar faces in the crowd. Many of you know my story. I've worked in football for over 20 years. Actually, just left Miami to return home where I grew up, right? And so leading the charge now at FC Juarez, since we're in Miami, a little bit of Latin flavor. So 99 days on the job now, my first 100 days. And for us, it's really important in terms of sustainability, how we affect environmental sustainability, social sustainability, financial stability with the club. We're a very unique club. We're in twin cities, El Paso, Texas, and Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, right? That's divided by a border, right? Divided by a border. We have fans on both sides, right? So how do we use it as an action for change, and how do we leverage our players as well to tell that story?
And do players need much education or convincing to back a sustainable strategy?
Not ours. I give them the entire credit in the world. I told them on Sunday night after our last game, they're ambassadors of our brand, right? So Juarez has a negative stigma on the world stage, obviously known for around the drug trade, right? So they are the actions, they are the agents for change, right, in the cities. So they help us tell the story of what we want to do and how we want to be more sustainable, right? So in a perfect world, our players would be like the FC Basel players in Switzerland. They would ride their bike, right, to training. They can't do that, partly because it's a dangerous city. In addition to, we've got a couple of players that live on the U.S. side, right? So they actually have to cross the border to get to training, right? But how do they also tell the story that, for example, the training fields that we train on, right, the water we use to irrigate those fields is from natural rainfall. And just so everyone knows, the rainfall in Juarez is 8 to 10 inches a year, right? So how do we do more with less?
Great stuff. We'll talk more about Juarez in a moment, but Sebastian, last but certainly not least, many maybe that are unaware of sustainable strategies may feel that it's socially conscious, but it's not something that can make clubs or brands money. And Everclimb are very much, I suppose it's fair to say, trying to bust that myth.
Yeah, so we took a lens of commercial viability to sustainability, and our focus is how do we help sport franchises develop new products for fan engagement and attract sponsors to fund the impact action that engagement generates. So through our technology, we connect consumers and fans to impact partners and projects that are not just around sustainability, but about social, community, and agnostic to the impact they're providing, and essentially reallocating traditional media spend that would go through the existing channels to fund impact action as a byproduct.
And once you're dealing with a club like Juarez, for example, what kind of business plan can you put in place? How long will it be before they potentially see a financial return? And are you directly dealing with the club, or are you reliant on external stakeholders as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we right now we're engaged with all the stakeholders in that workflow. So we help the club and sit down, look at their strategy. We understand what their customer base, their fan base is, their engagement is. We look at their social alignments and who you're working to support, and then really try and connect the commercial value straight away. So this isn't about a 2-3 year lead model to revenue. This is an instant revenue opportunity to extrapolate media budgets that traditionally go through social channels and other campaigns and divert that into impact action.
So we're going to widen it a little bit, talk about some different themes, and anybody on the stage obviously can feel free to input. But Gabriella, I want to start with you and come back to Reboot, because it's an example where a sector outside of sport, fashion, comes into clubs. Talk to me a little bit about the process of convincing a club to not only engage with a fashion brand, but do so specifically with a sustainable one.
So upcycling, which is the concept of taking something old and repurposing it into something new without having to chemically process it, was obviously something a bit difficult to convince a club or the league to get involved with, because it's so new. But I think that the idea behind taking a jersey that has been inside of a club equipment room and repurposing it into a new jersey for a fan is really unique and special. And if you harness the passion that a fan has to try to inspire change and also empower sustainable habits, that's where the key is. So I think the club, because they are very keen to, enable their fans to be more sustainable and use football as a driving force to do something good, it was very, easy for them to want to see where we could take this project together. And partners like Avery Dennison with their connected technology has allowed us to be able to tell this unique story. So it is a really exciting initiative for the club and for us as a new brand to be able to stand alongside such an influential club and be able to tell this unique story of sustainability, but also how we can keep these products alive beyond the game.
And I think when people hear sustainable apparel, they may question, is it at the expense of fashion? Is it at the expense of quality? Is it at the expense of science? Because Luis, running his football club, would probably love sustainable apparel, but he also has to ensure, if it's used and worn by the players, that scientifically and from a logistical perspective, everything also ties in with those wider sporting goals. So is it fair to say that it is a myth that something that is sustainable in apparel will lose quality somehow?
So I think that it's possible to be able to have sustainability and fashion coexist. It's just about bringing the right partners together. And I think that through Reboot, we're doing that by bringing Inter Miami, the league, Avery Dennison, and sport manufacturers such as Adidas together with a global network of designers to really elevate the design and bring it into culture, where you can meet fans where they are, but also encourage sustainable habits at the same time.
And Luis, what are your thoughts from the club point of view? What considerations go through your mind if somebody like Gabriella comes to you as an external partner and says, we want this product in your club, it's sustainable? When you hear that pitch, when you consider it, what kind of things are important to you before making a decision?
That's a great question. So I think one is we're always open to it. There's a healthy balance, and it's part of my job working with our sporting director. What's the healthy balance, as you mentioned, keeping the quality, right? But also doing what's right? As we try to leave the product in a better place than we found it, right? And making the world a better place. So for example, for us, it'd be amazing to have just artificial pitches, right? It doesn't rain a lot, it's less maintenance, right? Less carbon emissions, right? But at the end of the day, what's best for the players and their health also, so right? It's a healthy balance, I think. With that said, how can we be more green? So we wear green. For those who don't know, our green is inspired by the margarita. The margarita was invented in Ciudad Juarez, right? But how can we flip that and also tell the story of being green to provide a better world, right? So for example, we have fans that come over from El Paso to games, right? We encourage them, we have buses for them as soon as they cross the border to be more sustainable. But to answer your question, I think it's a healthy balance. We're always open to it. How do we make the players not give away their jerseys after every game? Not from a standpoint of a budgetary constraint, but more of how can we tell that story to be more sustainable?
So then, if we extend what we've just heard from bringing an outside sector into a sports club and think more broadly about what the modern football fan and the young football fan in particular wants, I think it's fair to say, Tom, and then afterwards Seb, that engaging with that young audience in particular to make them more socially conscious, more sustainable, more green is really important. And in the same way that Gabriella may use fashion to do that, you're using, for example, Tom, gamification. So talk a little bit about how fan engagement plays a part in sustainability, specifically around young audiences.
There was a really scary stat that YouGov put out. This was sort of UK and Europe based, so big football markets. And it said that Generation Z and Generation Alpha, who are, by the way, the sort of 8-year-olds, like our kids' age, they're the ones coming through. Those two generations are half as passionate about sports as we are. So we're the guys that pay for the subscription for the broadcasting. We're the ones that have the season tickets that go to the matches. We're the revenue for sports and football in particular. The generation coming through are half as passionate as we are because, well, there are a lot of other things that they turn their time to and attention to. And so actually football's got an existential crisis before you think about the planet on staying relevant to an audience and the future fans ultimately. What we know about sustainability, it is continually a top 3 issue to these young people. And as they get older and graduate and get into jobs and have families, this is going to stay a top issue. So actually it makes good business sense for football to be thinking about sustainability. How do we pull it in? And what we're starting to see, particularly in the UK, are some clubs being far more progressive. Yes, with their community outreach and stuff they do in the local area, but actually how do you use these massive brands and the reach that you have into households all over the world to talk about green things? So we're early on in this sort of gamification, fan engagement. There's lots of organisations here talking about broader fan engagement. I think football has this line that has to be careful that we do consume it to really enjoy it, right? We go to escape, we go for the joy, and we don't want football to be used to talk about all of life's social issues. So there is a fine line we have to get right, and there's more than just sustainability that, football gets sort of used to talk about, as we've seen at World Cups with, bans and things players have done. But we're at a really exciting stage. I think technology, fans want it, commercial directors, content teams within clubs really get this now. So I think in the next 2 or 3 years we're going to see a huge explosion in what the football industry does to address this issue and inspire fans.
Seb, does it matter if somebody as a fan starts engaging in sustainable practices just because they get something, whether it's a gamified incentive, whether it's a reward, even I suppose at the club end, if it's finances? Does it matter if that initial motivation comes with incentivization?
So in the lens that we look at this, the thing that we're trying to achieve is small behavioural change that leads to a massive movement in positive action for the planet. And that's social, biodiversity, environmental, emissions reductions, etc. So the entry point to that behavioural change doesn't need to be around impact. We need to understand that we need to engage with those consumers how they want to engage with it, and the byproduct is that positive outcome. So no, right now we need more people to do a lot more effort and engagement, and if they engage through fashion, through gamification, through broader fan engagement, all of those are great entry points, and if the byproduct is a positive outcome, then I think we'll start to see a huge acceleration in shifting that.
And in a previous life, you've worked with athletes as well. What role have athletes got to play in educating on sustainability and obviously promoting it? And I'll get your thoughts as well in a moment, Lewis, too. And do you feel that right now, in modern football, athletes are doing enough?
So I think athletes have a huge voice that they're able through social media now to promote those opinions, those opportunities at a very low cost. For an athlete to put out a post on social media, there is zero cost to them to do that. The challenge, I think, at the moment is, are there enough tools that can convert that voice into action? And I think it's trying to find and make sure that we empower athletes with the right tools and the businesses and the ideation that will lead to accountability and real change. Are they doing enough? I think some of them are very passionate. I think some of them don't necessarily have the tools to deploy that voice into impact.
Lewis, what are your thoughts? I sense in this region with the 2026 World Cup, and there'll be a lot of travel involved in that. It's expanded, so there'll be even more athletes than ever. And we've got still a big chunk of time between now and then for any clubs affiliated to these territories to push an authentic, sustainable agenda. What do you think Juarez can do between now and 2026, and specifically through your athletes, in order to keep this conversation both relevant and prominent?
Yeah, I mean, touching on what Sebastian was saying, you need to make them a part of the process and make them involved and help you tell the story. Even on the fashion side, right? There's no athlete today that will say they don't want to be a part of making the world more sustainable. Right? It actually benefits them to help, for them to say that, right? And for them to actually take action on it, right? So we need to engage our players, right, to be a part of that process. And it's also their story too, right? Because they have the most influence over the younger generation. So even my son now makes me be more sustainable, right? In terms of when he sees me grab a plastic bottle, he says, why don't you have your Yeti cup, for example, right? But I think for us, the players are a huge sign of what we want to do in the future. So for example, all of our youth teams, they don't drive to training. We pick them up, right? And that's part of one of our action plans to be more sustainable, right? So we'll have goals between now and 2026. The reality is we're just starting. We don't want to greenwash it either, right? We want to do it the right way, right? We'll have action plans for 26, and we'll measure what we do from a carbon emission standpoint. We'll measure what we do from a greenhouse gas standpoint, right? But for us, it's really a long-term strategy, right, towards 2030 when our club will be 15 years old, right? So what can we do now till 2026 that will help tell the story about being greener, right? And then ultimately by 2030, when now the kids who are playing in the U12s will be on the first team, right? What can they do now, right, to voice change in the community?
And Gabriella, it must be pretty cool with this continued Reboot partnership with Inter Miami and a first retail one to have an affiliation with Lionel Messi, David Beckham and so on. What are your thoughts on how big names like that can help promote sustainability?
So Reboot started at the professional level because of that reason, because the clubs and their athletes have such a platform and such a voice to really spark this change. So through that, the main obstacle in sustainability, especially in the fashion space, is changing consumer habits. So if you're able to do that through a club and through an athlete, for a young fan to see their favorite player or their favorite club promoting this type of behavior, you're more likely to see a change than in any other space. So that was the thinking behind starting at the professional level with all of these big names and really trying to inspire change.
And at the moment, you've been working with some high-profile designers, and going forwards, you want to expand Reboot and get more clubs involved. Has there been a point, or will there be a point, where there may be some player input? Because obviously, if those in the game are going to be wearing apparel or promoting apparel, they may want some say as to what it looks like.
We're exploring player-specific capsules, so we do want to get them involved and have them be ambassadors for the brand. For now, the main idea is to expand within Major League Soccer for the first year and then hopefully expand to clubs in Europe as well.
And then Tom, coming back to Planet League, how do you ensure that the gamification element and the head-to-head and the rivalry continues once these matchups end or outside of the sports sector?
A couple of really important things here. One is we all make promises in life to do something, exercise more or ring my mum more often or save for our pension, and we try our best to keep to them. And in climate, we might make a pledge to do something, which is fine, but actually we've moved beyond a promise. We've got to move into action. And so one of the things we do on the platform is to score your goal, you have to take a picture of your meat-free